The ill-fated submersible trip to the Titanic, led by the company OceanGate, highlights a growing trend of extreme tourism. In recent years, this underwater tourism has expanded beyond snorkeling and diving, and the all-encompassing experiences like deep-sea tours and luxury stays in submarines. Space exploration is another growth area. Jeff Bezos, Branson, Musk all have ventures in the works. Each has price tags ranging from the hundreds of thousands to millions, but there are some very big risks. The lack of regulation allows companies to push the limits of safety, endangering lives. For more on these new forms of tourism, I spoke with James Rodger. He's the assistant teaching professor in the Adventure Studies Department of Thompson Rivers University, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's an interesting concept, an interesting thing to think about. You know, the nature of human nature and the desire to travel is psychological, social, culture. There's a whole bunch of different aspects that drive humans to take these risks, but we all, of course, interpret risk differently.
Do you think that governments should regulate these ventures?
I think if you look at the history of the industry, you know, there's typically times when government does step in. You know, this is just one spotlight of a history of misadventures, you would say, across the adventure tourism industry. You know, going back to Everest in '96, and that debate constantly comes around every time there's a spotlight on the industry. What is too much? What risks are too high?
There has been some criticism, and not necessarily from this accident, but when things do go wrong, countries, in this case Canada, the U.S., a number of other countries came in, sent their ships, looking whether it's an air disaster or submarine disaster. Typically, we don't think about the cost, but there is a significant cost when it comes to either a salvage or a rescue operation. And I don't know if this is different than you and I climbing Mount Everest and getting stuck there or something of that nature. But some people have criticized that the taxpayers ultimately are on the hook when things go wrong, and these tax bills seemingly are getting higher and higher.
Yeah, and you know, that's a problem that governments face, that we in different societies face. Of course, there's different models for search and rescue and how it's funded. But at the end of the day, when we do have these large multinational, in this case, efforts for rescue, you know, resources are being spent that could possibly be spent other places, and there probably is a debate about who looks to cover some of these costs and how do these people insure themselves against these type of activities.
More recently, the last few years, there's been this race, if you will, by billionaires to send people like us, or maybe not us, maybe their billionaire friends, up into space and take selfies and take pictures and all that. And, you know, we haven't had anything significantly, knock on wood, go wrong yet, but it's really, as you probably guess, there's going to be high risk. There's going to be issues. I suppose people who want to go into space are willing to pay $1 million or $2 million to experience, you know, zero gravity and see the Earth from high above. But again, it goes back to regulation, right? You're going to build this plane in your garage. I get it. You've got billions, so you're probably building it correctly. But if I fly on a small jet from here to New York, those planes are controlled by air traffic control. Those planes are tested by the FAA. I mean, there are safety things in position to make sure that these entities can operate safely with their passengers. Why shouldn't we have that for this?
You know, I'm not as well versed as I should be in the space industry. I'm assuming that NASA or the FAA is currently setting some requirements, but the reality is they will just move to another jurisdiction or another place that was willing to support them. And you know, that's the human nature. Humans are going to push these boundaries. They're going to head into uncharted territories at risks, and that's just sort of the nature of the human expansion across the globe. And I think as long as we're here on Earth, there's going to be a drive for people to keep exploring. In some ways, it drives innovation. And so I think there's a place for it. I'd hate to live in a world where all of a sudden everything becomes too risky and governments have to regulate everything. I think there is some onus on the individual to own their responsibilities for their choices. And you know, these two sad cases that we've seen, they own those responsibilities and their choices, and that is part of being human, I believe.
So let's just say, for example, our producer Nanuka wants to go on a 1-week trip to Europe and go hike the mountains, so to speak, and she joins these tour groups. She may not be familiar with who these groups are. What are some questions that these tourists who go on these adventures, typically they're not experts, that's why they have guides that take them around. What questions should they be asking prior to committing to going on these, I guess, higher risk trips?
Yeah, that's a great question. In a lot of jurisdictions, there's certifications for different guiding individuals or guiding aspects. In Europe, there's the Mountain Guide Association. You'd want to make sure, see the track record of the company, see that they're employing their guides. An easy question is to ask what their emergency response protocols are, or sort of what's their backup. You can take a little bit of onus on yourself by doing the proper education and research. In some of those cases, the insurance that we get as travelers, there's a new market for rescue insurance. So there's some other options out there for people to help protect themselves beyond just what the company will do. And again, take some ownership in their choices.